Hi, this is Jerry Lynn Hogg, and I'm the chair for Tunisha Singleton's dissertation. We have the rest of the committee here, Gary Hare, Pamela Rutledge, Dan Sewell, and Joe Pine. And Tunisha's dissertation title is Digital Fandom, Translating the Sport Experience and Fan Identification Through Emergent Technology. I'm going to turn it over to you, Tunisha.
Thank you, Dr. Hogg. I sincerely appreciate everybody coming here today for my final oral review. Like Jerry Lynn said, my dissertation is called Digital Fandemonium, Translating the Sport Experience and Fan Identification Through Emergent Technology. So I joined the program in fall of 2013, and in the last few years, I've concentrated all of my efforts in understanding the sport experience as a transmedia property and emotional construct. And only recently have researchers started to consider the importance of team identification and the multidimensional nature of the sport experience. So while being a sports fan is not a new concept, what has changed are the ways in which we identify with and experience sport. New technology and social dynamics are constantly changing the industry, and more changes are on the way. The digital disruptors are here, and the modes and habits of consumption are shifting. And what my dissertation and this presentation will dive into is how contemporary sport experiences are constructed and the impact social media has on fan identification and consumer behavior. So as an agenda for this presentation, it will begin with an introduction for some personal context, and then move into the current state of sport affairs and highlight some important literature in the disciplines of organizational and experience psychology. Then I'll go into the challenge area and discuss what my methodology was in securing an answer to this problem. Then lastly, the final two sections, I'll discuss the results of my study and give some final concluding thoughts. Much of what I learned from the sport experience is driven from my own personal observations and deep dives into the narrative. Some of the earliest memories I have are experiences surrounding sport. I vividly remember watching the Los Angeles Lakers, my family's favorite team, not mine. It was about 1989, and my family assumed our ritual positions.
Go Lakers.
Go Lakers, that's right. My mother laid on the couch in her Laker pajama pants, my older brother glued to the television, and I sat on my dad's lap, concentrating on his opinion of the players and the punch I was drinking from a limited edition Lakers mug that was issued by Mobil Gas Station, one of their many sponsors at the time that had their championship years etched in the glass. I even recalled the social groups in later years where my parents invited their friends over to watch Mike Tyson fights on pay-per-view, and just how hyped they were despite each fight only lasting a few moments. I remember pulling my brother's tube socks over my hands to make gloves. I grabbed a pillow, wrapped a shoestring around it, and I hung it from a closet rod to turn it into a punching bag. Then there's the live event experience. I remember my first was a World Wrestling Federation house show in 1991. I dressed head to toe in my favorite performer, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels swag. I toted posters under my arm and proclaimed my 8-year-old love for him. From the pyrotechnics to the complete strangers who picked me up and put me on their shoulders so I could get the perfect view, everything was larger than life. But as I got older, I began to wonder if other people have similar experiences with sport, particularly in all the different environments it offers. It couldn't be just me whose identity is patched with sport team colors and brand logos and a daily itinerary that hinged on what time the game was coming on that night, right? To attend a live event, an excuse to have social gatherings, or as a family pastime, people have always used sport to feel good about themselves and to be connected to something bigger. Sport is a conduit to having multi-dimensional experiences. And what do I mean by that? I mean that our social identity gives us a number of relationships that we have some significant level of personal investment in, some external stake. Trending digital media developments like social media sports have become embedded as a new pillar within the industry. The integration of social media has made fan engagement much more personal and intimate than before. This warrants the investigation of the cognitive impact social media has. This emphasis in technology means that team identification is likely stimulated by new patterns of digital media consumption and active social media use. So the center of this dissertation focused on how technology impacts the relationship between self and sport. The research question asked, what impact does social media participation have on team identification and the overall sport experience? If we look at the evolution of sports media consumption, We see a pattern in human activity of wanting to be more fully immersed and engaged with media. From 1911, when a Kansas versus Missouri college football game was mechanically reproduced via Western Union telegram, and this was to a venue filled with over 1,000 people. There's values of group membership and belonging. The radio broadcast of a heavyweight boxing fight in 1921, which at the time was considered the largest audience in history. It happened with sport because of the novelty and live competition. To the world's first television coverage of sports in the 1936 Summer Olympic Games, and the first sports broadcast in the United States between Columbia versus Princeton in a college baseball game. So now, of course, in the modern era with multiple screen use, live streaming Thursday night football games on Twitter, and now the capability of watching a game from the best seat in the house via virtual reality. Sport fans want to be as close to the action and immersed with the media as possible. This is a quote I like from Jeremy Jacobs, owner of the Boston Bruins. It says, "Sport have drawn people together to cheer for their heroes for as long as there has been a record of human activity. Sports has been seen to rival religion in the power to unify diverse populations, and in some cases have sparked positive social movements that carry over to the worlds of business and government. Sport represents so much more than just box scores and trade rumors. Sports today offers us opportunities to discuss real-world topics, say standing for the national anthem, societal issues like Black Lives Matter. But sport is also a leader now in emerging technology, and it's still just fun to consume. With the adoption and acceleration of digital and immersive media platforms like social media and virtual reality, it's evident that sport has transformed itself into a transmedia property and uses cross-platform strategy to extend the game's narrative. Fantasy sports, esports, social media, pre-game, post-game, feature stories, etc. All are used to bridge the gap between games with additive programming and content, which ultimately affects the way people engage with sports. The experience in sport is one that far exceeds 9 innings of a ball game or 4 quarters of a basketball or football game. Moments like this one illustrate the many relationships we form with sport and the multidimensional nature of it. So now we transition into the current state of sport affairs and a quick overlook on the major concepts within the literature. After curating a lot of literature, I found that there are 2 perspectives within sports, an emotional context and a digital context. Emotionally, research reveals concepts of belonging, connection, values, purchase patterns, and goals. Since the way we identify with sport is evolving, that evolution is influenced by digital context. What do I wear? Where do I go? What do I say? How do I say it? What do I use? When you trace patterns of media consumption and human behavior, you'll see that there are certain behaviors, expectations, multiple screens, and devices that all fans must make a conscious decision about in order to prepare for their sport experience. So how are experiences even constructed? There are 4 threads that comprise an experience: sensual, emotional, compositional, and spatiotemporal. Sensory engagement relates to the immediate feeling one has to a particular situation, such as feeling a momentum shift in a basketball game or a mechanic's strong feel for engines. Emotions are qualities of a particular experience, acting as a color palette that holds all aspects of a situation together, also making each experience different and independent from each other. Looking at the relationship between parts and the experience as a whole is reflected in the compositional thread. While an experience might be looked at as an ordinary flow of events, the way a person and an event are related make up the overall sentiment and satisfaction of the experience as a whole. For example, a fan's experience at a preseason basketball game would feel very different than if it was a finals championship game. Parts or variables of this experience could be age, level of affiliation, game location, teams playing, cost, etc., each of which contribute to the composition of the overall experience. Lastly, the spatiotemporal thread concerns the space and time qualities of an experience. That is, the sense of time speeding up or slowing down, or space closing in or feeling vast. These 4 threads illustrate the multidimensional nature of experiences and the roots of psychology. One source at the foundation of my literature is written by my external examiner, who's on the call right now, Joe Pine, co-author of The Experience Economy. What is heavily expressed in this literature is the notion that customers now want experiences. Goods and services are no longer enough. We're now producers as we are consumers, and simple spectatorship has gone out the window. And this certainly applies to the sports world as well. Current studies note that sport fandom symbolizes more than fanaticism and largely relates to the innate desires for belonging, group membership, and social identity theories. Daniel Wan is a sports communication and fandom researcher who has dedicated his work to team identification theories. He defines team identification as an individual having a psychological connection to a team or athlete and is central to one's overall identity. His research states that team identification facilitates well-being by increasing social connections for the fan. So since fan identification embodies more than simple spectatorship, how do we cognitively become committed to something, whether it be an athlete or a company? The answer can be found in organizational psychology, where authors Natalie Allen and John Mayer in 1990 developed a three-component model of identification and commitment. This was to conceptualize the sense of belonging one might have to a business. The first is affective, which is to want, the emotional commitment such that the strongly committed person identifies with, is involved in, and enjoys membership in. As in, I want to watch the game. I want to tailgate to be around other fans and share the experience. The second is continuance, which refers to the need a person has to stay committed and engaged in a consistent line of activity based on their recognition of the costs associated with discontinuing that activity. So in other words, if I stop doing X, I will lose Y. If I stop cheering for the Steelers, I will lose things in common with my friends. This is the need portion of commitment, as in I need to watch the game or I'll undergo a fear of missing out. The third is normative, which are feelings of obligation that an employee or member has. Individuals who exhibit behaviors solely because they believe it is the right and moral thing to do. This is the should factor, the ought, the responsibility, as in I should watch the game because I feel obligated to my team. Group identity is emphasized to account for the sport community and one's personal stake in it. This notion of personal claim has conceptualized sports fans as external stakeholders. Identity utility, it represents a fulfillment of self through a series of supportive behaviors and activities that are meant to satisfy the attitudinal and behavioral commitment fans have to a team, player, or organization. Based on the literature regarding fan behavior, I've categorized this inventory within the components that I felt were most appropriate, creating this model. This inventory includes customer recruitment and stronger loyalty, product utilization and resilience to negative information, and company product promotion, and a willingness to invest in company shares. Now, this leads me into the challenge area of this dissertation, discussing the problem and methodology. My research questioned again, what impact does social media participation have on team identification and the overall sport experience? Current research shows that male massive fans spend 2.5 hours a day on social media, with over 70% of that time on sports content. And females, over 1.5 hours a day, and over 50% of that time on sports content as well. With these numbers, what bearing does this have on them cognitively when it comes to their affiliation and well-being? To address this, I have a series of hypotheses that pertain to each component of commitment. For the affective attachment, my hypothesis stated, strengthened group membership and player team loyalty are predicted through social media participation. For continuance, well-being is predicted through high levels of fandom and social media use. And for the normative form, high levels of fandom and social media use predict an obligation to promote their favorite team or player. The fourth hypothesis down here is about the overall experience and claims that the value of the overall sport experience is considered greater than the actual event itself. Now we move on to the problem and the methodology. To date, there is no empirical analysis or evidence that explores how sport identification has evolved to provide optimal experiences with technology. The ultimate aim of this study was to explore how sport experiences in fandom are facilitated and boosted with emergent technologies, such as social media or virtual reality. Previous scales have only been unidimensional, scaling just one aspect of psychological connection and not the conduit to the experience or relationship. And the channel that fans are using now and the feature that all immersive media platforms are working to incorporate is social media. So my initial focus in this dissertation is there in social. So what I've done is created an electronic survey that extends the area that researchers and sport fans are organization members and not just fans. So under that guise, I chose an existing survey from Allen and Mayer in 1990 and updated the questionnaire so that the subject is sports and social media. For example, one statement from the original is, "Too much in my life would be disrupted if I decided I wanted to leave my organization now." To modernize this in relation to digitally mediated sports, this item has been updated to, "Too much of my sport experience would be disrupted if I were unable to access social media before, during, or after a sporting event." Similar revisions were made to the remaining identity utility behaviors and components of commitment. This study was structured as a 6-part questionnaire with 29 questions in total. Data was collected from a sample of self-reported sport fans. Participants were recruited via email, word of mouth, and social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Respondents completed the survey by logging onto the internet and going to the website that's posted under Collect Data. The study remained open for about 30 days, and inclusion criteria included being over the age of 18. In completing this survey, participants benefited by gaining a greater psychological awareness of their own motivations, their own identification, and their own participation patterns with sports content and social media use. Using the online survey platform Qualtrics, questions used a combination of 7-point Likert scales, multiple choice questions, and one open-ended response. All data was analyzed and coded for SPSS. The questionnaire is designed to cover all the necessary elements in organizational research that's relevant to sport fan psychology. So while the core of the study was meant to cover the components of commitment and supporting behaviors of identity utility that I described earlier, questions are also designed to integrate technological competency and social media use. And this, of course, is to account for the present state of media consumption and creation. A one-way ANOVA was conducted to compare the effect of social media use on the various components of commitment to sport. The significance threshold was set at 0.05, and this p-value was used as the cutoff for determining significance for each hypothesis test. A series of variables were created in order to generate a means and complete testing. Dependent variables correspond to each hypothesis measure. In addition, loyalty was created as a dependent variable in order to accurately measure the commitment participants have to their sport. Independent variables include social media use and fandom. In order to create high and low categories for these two, a median split was used to create the two groups. So now on to the results. The affective hypothesis stated again that group membership and player team loyalty are strengthened by social media participation. An analysis of variance showed that the effect of social media on loyalty was significant, with the value below the cutoff of 0.05. A means plot was generated to give a visual representation of the group means and their linear relationship on the left. Using the same test, an analysis of variance showed that the effect of social media on affective was also significant, seen on the right. What this translates to is that higher the social media use, higher the levels of loyalty and affective attachment. Strong sentiments of interaction and loyalty are revealed. Fans want to feel a part of something larger than themselves. Fans want to boast their pride by reliving experiences and telling others. And both of these values are now strengthened by social media participation. This data speaks to the importance of upholding one's team affiliation and the significance of interacting with like-minded others. This suggests that social media can act as a digital benefactor to consumers, strengthening their ability to preserve team fidelity and group relations. A model sport experience must be comprised of authentic opportunities to extend group membership and endorse one's affiliation and loyalty before, during, and after an event. The hypothesis for the variable of continuance stated that well-being is predicted through high levels of fandom and social media use. A one-way ANOVA was conducted to compare the effect of social media on well-being and a resilience to negative information. An analysis of variance showed that the effect of social media on well-being was significant, represented in the means plot to the left. Using the same test, the effect of fan affiliation on well-being was also significant, and this is shown on the right. We can infer from the continuance results that fans feel a need to consume sports content or they will undergo a fear of missing out. The supporting activity of product utilization is clear in the data. For example, in question 20, a solid 41% majority answered strongly agree to consuming social and digital media content when looking for game-related commentary, replays, and highlights. This data reveals that sports consumers use digital media as a passage to fill the void for any missed information. However, when it comes to resilience of negativity, social media does not play nearly as important of a role. It was actually insignificant. For example, in question 22 shown here, over 25% answered strongly disagree to a statement reflecting the need to use social media to ward off negative comments. This shows a drastic contrast between supporting behaviors, which was actually pretty surprising to me. Fans require social and digital media to fulfill the needs of preserving loyalty and uphold group relations. But social media is not needed when it comes to receiving negative information. One can infer that deflecting negativity resides in the emotional, mental space rather than a digital one. Hypothesis for the normative variable stated that high levels of fandom and social media use predict an obligation to promote their favorite team or player. An analysis of variance showed that the effect of social media on sports-related promotion was also significant. The means plot on the left was created to illustrate the linear relationship between group means of social media use and normative attachment. Using the same one-way test, results show that the effect of fan affiliation on the obligation to promote was also significant, shown on the right. What this translates to is that higher the social media use, higher the obligation there is to promote their favorite team or player. Fans will feel an obligation to promote their team or player because it's essentially the same as promoting an extension of self. The emotional bond fans have depict a continuous relationship with the targeted object and a sense of psychological ownership. Sport consumers want to use the merged, combined force of physical and digital spaces to boast their allegiances. For fans in the modern era of sports consumption, wearing one's favorite jersey is no longer enough. Now, the opportunity to authenticate one's affiliation in a digital space is also welcomed. This includes the behavior of reposting team player-related information, sharing sport-related selfies, using official hashtags and filters on Snapchat, and chatting with others in social forums about game-related information. The final hypothesis variable is for the sport experience, stating that the overall value of the sport experience is greater than the actual event itself. An analysis of variance showed that the effect of social media on the entire experience of sport was also significant, extending its value. What this translates to is that the presence of social media in sport is a necessity as much as it is a convenience. The life of the game is lived out through the social identities of fans. What sports represent is not limited to just the playing field. More accurately, contemporary sport experiences are constructed from a set of emotional and behavioral aspects that live in both physical and digital spaces. This includes social media platforms where identities are furnished through the efficacy of creating content and the interaction from connecting with like-minded others, and athlete team representatives directly. Relatedly, the final question within this variable asks participants to agree or disagree with the sport experience being greater than the game. A strong 67% of respondents answered between somewhat agree and strongly agree to this statement. This emphasizes that fans place value on the emotional commitment behind the experience of consuming sport and does not place all of their external stake on the game itself. Rather, the variables of group membership, team player, community loyalty, interaction, and content creation are all equally important, if not more, than the final outcome of the event. Moving on to my final thoughts and conclusion. In sum, higher levels of social media use result in higher levels of loyalty, group membership, well-being, obligation to promote, and the overall sport experience. Using organizational and experience psychology as the foundation, a self-sport construct is needed to depict the multidimensional nature of our relationships with sport. To provide this, I've constructed an experiential ecosystem model to illustrate the cognitive associations within fan identification. Overlapping fields within this network are community, self, and organization, as in fan to group, fan to self, and fan to team. Social and immersive media like AR and VR are the gateways to enable new experiences, perspectives, and capabilities. What's happening now is the addition of a choose-your-own-adventure narrative that allows fans to participate in the transmedia brand that is sport by extending the experience through multiple ways. Social media and AR/VR represent a turning point in media consumption, and the sport experience is no longer storytelling, it's story living. I like to think of things like this. If technology is a car, story must be the driver. The car can't go anywhere without something behind the wheel driving it. Storytelling, that's the point. Making the tech useful, relevant, and participatory by taking consumers on a journey. As far as future research and other considerations are concerned, to get a rich understanding of participants' backgrounds, research on this subject should include racial and socioeconomic information, which are two areas that this study lacked. As noted earlier, there are various external group identities that fans can feel affiliated to. That includes racial, ethnic, financial group attributes. This warrants the inclusion of all of these things for any future study. And I think doing so will provide a more comprehensive evaluation of modern day team identification. And furthermore, investigating the mental market of sports and how experiences are constructed with technology, it offers a lot of rich opportunities to explore. So deeper correlations between gender and social media use or regionally based information are a couple examples of an area that can reveal useful information and should be further explored. Analyzing the vertical of fan engagement and media technology, this could provide lessons and principles for navigating the daily lives of those impacted by sport, which includes parents, partners, managers, businessmen, and researchers alike. The literary groundwork behind my experiential ecosystem model fills a gap in present research, thereby extending the disciplines of sports communication, organizational, and media psychology. The last thing I'd like to emphasize that summarizes this dissertation is something that I call the 3 E's: emotion, engagement, and experience. For emotion, tech should be used to strategically build emotionally binding content. Understanding the human drivers of human behavior will tap into your audience's needs and help create brand loyalty. For engagement, we have to work to ignite the physical, digital, or virtual landscape with activity, invite opportunities to engage and see the user experience come to fruition. And the last is experience. Products and services come and go, but great experiences have no expiration date, much like sports. All practitioners must turn precious moments into valuable assets, because experience is undefeated, and in the context of sports identification, the experience is greater than the game. Thank you all very, very much. I sincerely appreciate everybody's help. Thank you.